best in filling in that PowerPoint. So stem cells, I'm hoping you got the idea that stem cells are these types of cells that essentially don't have a job. From the second part of the reading that I asked you to do, I'm hoping that you realize that we have all kinds of different types of cells in our body. We've got skin cells that cover our skin and make sure that you know, things don't fall out and that, you know, keep things nice and moist on the inside. We've got blood cells that have functions. We've got bone cells. We've got all kinds of different types of cells. But all of those cells have to start out as a single cell, right? So when every one of us was conceived at some point in time, there's that single cell that starts the whole process. And obviously that single cell can't be every one of those cells at the same time. So it's got to start as being this undifferentiated cell. Now, what does it mean to be differentiated? It means that it then breaks, you know, not breaks up, but when it starts to divide, some of those cells then take on a certain job. They then become skin cells, and they become bone cells. In other words, they differentiate into these different jobs or different functions. But they all start out as this cell that has no particular function, and that's what a stem cell is. It's a cell that in an organism, and in the case we're talking about humans, that doesn't have a particular job that eventually does get a particular job, all right? So stem cells are cells in animals that can differentiate into many, what do you think I want there based on what I just talked about? Many what? Many jobs? Many blank job cell? No. Are cells in animals that can differentiate into many blank cell blank. Specialized cell functions? I'd like that. That wasn't what I put down on mine, but specialized cell functions would do that. I was simply just looking for different cell types. But what you said there is exactly correct. So it has the ability to differentiate into many, if this is still blank, you're filling this in on yours, many different cell types, different cell types, all right, such as muscle cells, nerve cells, skin cells, etc. All right, so they're cells that can differentiate, and that means they aren't differentiated to begin with. So all life begins as a blank blank. What do we have there? Anybody got something there? Yep. Fertilized egg or fertilized cell. Yep. Fertilized egg or fertilized cell, sometimes called a zygote. So that first cell, right, the sperm cell gets into the egg cell, it fertilizes it. We have this thing that we call the zygote, all right? The zygote divides by, yep. It divides by 2, but it keeps on dividing. No, I'm talking about a specific way in which cells divide, and we actually know the name of this. Mitosis. It divides by mitosis. In other words, it divides into 2 identical cells, and then those 2 divide into 4. They divide into identical cells. So now they're dividing as per normal. So again, these cells at the beginning are stem cells. They don't have any jobs yet, all right? They're waiting for their instructions based on their DNA on what to become, whether they become muscle cells or nerve cells or bone cells. They're waiting for that instructions. The embryo is made up of blank blank. What do I have there? The embryo is made up of, what did we call these cells that don't have jobs? stem cells. They're made up of stem cells, all right? These cells blank and blank into the necessary tissues, organs, and organ systems. Yep. Divide, I like divide, but I don't think necessarily replace because nothing's there yet. Yeah, I see what you're saying. I'm going to put here divide, and blank into the necessarily tissues. This is where we've got that word where they then start to get their jobs, and the word is differentiate, all right? Or I'm going to just put change. Change into. Change, just to keep it simple. So they divide, and then they start getting their instructions to change into the particular cells that they're going to be doing. Bone, skin cells, muscles, etc., etc. All right. So how is this done? It is directed by the blank information encoded within the DNA. What do we call that information that is found in the DNA? What is the word we use to talk about that information that is found in your DNA that determines, your traits, etc., etc.? Genetic. So it's directed by the genetic information. Genetic information encoded within the cell's DNAs and requires certain parts of the DNA to be turned blank or blank. Any ideas? On and off. On and off. Because within the cell is the entire DNA strand for your entire body. So certain parts of that DNA need to be turned on to tell that to turn into a piece of hair or to be turned into the muscle cell. And if it's not going to be a piece of hair, that other part has to be turned off and the other piece needs to be turned on. So something turns on and off these instructions so that they know what to turn into. All right. Types of stem cells. So it turns out that in the past 10 years or so, biologists and doctors have realized that these stem cells can be used to repair damaged cells. So let's say someone gets a spinal cord injury where their nerve cell is broken in some way, and therefore the information can't get down to their legs, and therefore they can't use their legs, right? They're paraplegic. Well, some doctors believe that if you take stem cells that are these non-differentiated cells and you inject them into this area, that by being in an environment of nerve cells, those stem cells will get the nerve switch turned on and they would turn into new nerve cells, maybe fixing the connection in the spinal cord, thus allowing electrical signals to get back down to the legs and therefore getting the legs to work, right? Some even think maybe damaged parts of the brain, like in Parkinson's disease, where something isn't functioning properly that doesn't allow them to control their muscles properly. If you took stem cells and you injected it into that area where that muscle control is, would those stem cells take on the job of those damaged brain cells and therefore repair that? So stem cell therapy is really promising to take care of all kinds of different cellular problems that they can then inject these cells that don't have a job yet into that area, and maybe they'll take on the job and fix the problem. Yes? No, they actually do that. But there was a big problem at the beginning, because at the beginning, scientists believed that only developing embryos had these stem cells. So the plan was, for some people, would be to take a bunch of these, say, eggs that maybe some people had frozen that they maybe wanted to, have babies later on, and fertilize them with some sperm, maybe from a sperm bank, create these little embryos, right? And then take those stem cells, and instead of letting a human being develop, take the stem cells and inject them into somebody and have them fix that person. Now, obviously, there's some ethical issues with that, right? Because, certain religions believe that as soon as conception takes place, you've got the human being. So there were issues with using these embryonic stem cells. All right? So where can you get stem cells from? That's what the question became. The doctors wanted to know, we need to get stem cells from somewhere in order to do this type of thing. Well, obviously, embryonic stem cells, listen up, are found in developing embryos. All right? And they can differentiate into all types of cells. I dropped an S off the end of that. So embryonic stem cells were awesome in that you could use them anywhere and everywhere. They just developed into whatever cell. But you had to take them from an embryo. And that was an issue. That was a situation that was a problem. So it turns out, though, that there are other places to get stem cells in adults. They've recently, well, they've discovered that you can get stem cells from adults. But here you can see, here we've got the egg and the sperm, and then you make an embryo, and then you take some of those cells, and then you can inject them into various places, and you can make that happen. So where do they get stem cells from else? From other places. You can get stem cells from tissues. So there are ways to get it from adult tissues. Yep. Yep. That I have no idea. This is really kind of beyond what I know. I know that the prospect for the spinal cord fixing, I believe that's just a prospect. I don't think anybody's ever done that one. I'm not sure why. But they do use stem cells, again, in brain things I've heard of, and especially in things like for cancers. And my next example has that on there. So can they do that for the young guys? I have no idea. I really don't know. I am beyond what I know. You know what I mean? So where else can you get stem cells? You can get tissue stem cells from adults, all right, adult tissues, such as bone marrow. So in the brain, they're finding neural stem cells. In the heart, there are muscular stem cells. In the bone, there's bone marrow, which has stem cells that can turn into different types of blood cells. But these, they're finding they can only develop into certain cell types. They cannot simply become everything, all right? So if you've got a blood issue, because our blood is produced in the bone marrow, if you've got a blood issue, then you take the stem cells from the bone marrow and you can transplant them into somebody else, right? And then hopefully they start doing the job. Yep.
Yeah, like my uncle had something wrong with blood.
Yep.
I had to do that for him.
Yep.
As well, 'cause, like, at first, when he first went there, it was really bad. Like, he might not have made it.
Yep.
But they ended up giving him something, and he's
Just fine. Yep. Probably, well, the typical one is leukemia. That's what I want there, and I got to check the spelling because I don't know it very well. Leukemia. Leukemia. All right, is a cancer of the blood where the stem cells in your bone marrow divide too quickly and they do not form functioning blood cells. So, in the end, the stem cells in the bones are not working properly, so you can get then a bone marrow transplant. Stem cells can be obtained from. They've discovered you can also get stem cells from, and I'm going to put in here, banked cord blood. What do you think that is? Banked cord blood or cord blood. Yep. Yeah, it's blood taken from an umbilical cord when a child is born. Some parents, what they're doing now is they're taking a little bit of that blood and they're paying someone to freeze that because there's a lot of stem cells in there. So then, if that child later on in their lifetime has an issue where they need stem cells, they can use those stem cells to treat themselves because it'll be a perfect match for their blood and they won't have to go and look for a bone marrow donor, right? So it's a perfect match and therefore it can be used. Yep?
This is like kind of off topic. Like a list.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
But is this everything from farm? That's so it didn't for everything stuff and it has so many stem cells that can like rebuild itself.
Itself.
Like, yeah.
So if it loses a chunk, it just rebuilds that piece. Yep. That's exciting. And it would be stem cells that do that. That makes good sense.
Pretty sure that scientists actually took one of them and made a colony of like 20,000.
Of these worms based from that one stem cell. That's exciting as well.
Good morning.
Yep.
It's Max here.
Max, right there. Are you taking them? Out the back door there, Max.
Thank you.
Okay. Or another person's bone marrow. Listen up, folks, please. Another person's bone marrow. All right. Banked cord blood is rich in stem cells obtained from the umbilical cord. It is banked or stored for later uses if that particular child needs that in the future. All right, that's kind of neat. So the stem cells can be put into the body and can then be used to treat various things. You'll notice it says there Parkinson's. They're working on things like I said, spinal cord injuries, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, let's now talk about the specialized cells. So what are the options that these cells can become? And these are ones that you should maybe have some of the blanks filled in. Who has red blood cells? What do they deliver and what do they do? What do you got?
Deliver oxygen or remove carbon.
Yeah, deliver oxygen and carbon dioxide. Excellent. Skin cells. Who's got it? Yep.
Cover the body
And reduces water loss. Water, very important within our bodies. If the water wasn't there, the cells couldn't get any of their nutrients. So that's very important. Okay, click on the next one. Bone cell. Who's got it? Yep. Yep, stores calcium and builds new bone. Nice. Muscle cells. Muscle cells. Who's got it? Yep, back of it. They contract and allow movement. Excellent. Contract and allow for movement. All right, and we will talk more about that when we talk about these different systems, the muscular system. All right, fat cells, what do they do? Yep.
stores energy in the form of fat.
Energy in the form of fat and nerve cells. Nerve cells, who's got it? Yeah, Cade. Conducts electrical impulses to send to different parts of the body. Is that what it says in the book?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a mouthful. Coordinated activity. In other words, to make things move the way they're supposed to in order to complete a task. Excellent. Okay, now this is something that I've just kind of added on. I know it's not very much in the textbook, but I used to teach about this when I used to teach the unit on sound. So I do want to talk a little bit about the way the ear works, and then I'll show you something in terms of sound, and I don't know whether we'll just have, we might not watch the full video, but we'll watch a bit of it. Anyway, let's talk a little bit about these specialized cells in the ear. And this picture here is a picture of it. This comes out of the textbook. Inside this circular looking organ right there, that thing right there, that kind of a snail shaped thing is called the cochlea, C-O-C-H-E-L-A, cochlea. And the cochlea is, yes, it's a giggly word. It is what I'm saying. Some people say cochlea, so it doesn't sound as bad, but it's pronounced cochlea. All right, now listen up. Listen. Inside here, inside the cochlea, which is inside your inner ear, are these little tiny appendages that come off of the cells. They're called cilia. We've already encountered cilia. They're the little kind of hair-like protrusions on a cell. And what they do is they vibrate, listen please, they vibrate in response to sound that catches in our ear. So how does the sound get way inside this organ here? Well, when you hear a sound, right, that sound wave comes in and is funneled down this auditory canal until it gets to there, and this thing right here vibrates in and out. What do you think that thing is called? It's right in that canal, and when the sound comes in, it vibrates. Does anybody know what that's called? The eardrum. When sound enters the ear, it's funneled down to the eardrum. To the eardrum. All right? Here, the sound blank are transferred by blank 3 tiny bones. The sound, what do you think? Waves or vibrations? Waves or vibrations? The sound vibrations are transferred by moving 3 tiny bones. Those 3 tiny bones are right here. There's one of them that is there, there's another one that's there, and there's a third one that's right in there. They're the smallest bones in the body. Every time that eardrum moves, those 3 bones move a little bit, all right? They vibrate a little bit. And that last one right there, it's called the stirrup. It bumps up against the end of that snail-like organ called the cochlea. So when it hits that thing, the liquid inside the cochlea, which is mostly water, vibrates. You know how when you're in a swimming pool and somebody maybe makes a noise or tacks a coin on the bottom of the pool, you can hear it so far away. Have you ever noticed that? How sounds can really travel through the water? Same thing here. When these bones bump up against here, the sound rushes into that cochlea. Now, listen up. These hairs have different lengths. Some of them are really long, and some of them are really short. And if the sound is a low frequency sound, then the long hairs vibrate, all right? And that sends a message to our brain, because when they vibrate, they send the electrical impulse to the brain, and we hear a low frequency. But if there's a really high frequency, then the short little hairs vibrate. Listen up, please. So then the short little hairs vibrate, all right? Now, let's finish off this, and then we'll talk a little bit about our ability to hear. So here, the vibrations are sent into the snail-shaped organ called the cochlea, C-O-C-H-L-E-A, the cochlea, oops, and I spelled it wrong that way. Anyway, inside are small hair-like cells called cilia, all right? 2 L's in cilia or just 1? Cilia. When these cells vibrate, a nerve impulse is sent to our brain, and we hear. We hear, all right? And there's a little bit about loudness, right? We measure loudness in something called decibels, and the greater the decibel level, the more the vibration is. Yep. A really loud sound to kind of disorient something? Well, they would be way up here in the high decibel levels. You bet. This just has some various things here. So leaves rustling are like 10 decibels. A conversation is 60 decibels. A power mower is 80 decibels. Right in here between 80 and 90 decibels. Once you get into 90 decibels and higher, it's dangerous. That's why it has the red. So like an angle grinder, a chainsaw, a pneumatic hammer, a gunshot is 120, a jet taking off. When you get way up into those very, very high loudness levels, those hairs are being damaged, all right? I don't know if you've ever experienced something super loud. They sometimes try to simulate this in a movie where if there's a bang, everything starts to ring and everything's quiet for a while and the sound comes back up. That is a real thing. All of those hairs go flat. They're not vibrating for a brief moment because they've just been knocked right over, and once they get back up and they can start to vibrate again, you can start to hear again. So that's a real thing. Yep. Exactly. So right. You don't want to do that because in maybe 30 years or so you won't be hearing much of anything, because every time you do that, you're damaging those little hairs. So not a good thing. I wouldn't do that, you know, on purpose. All right, hold on one second. Here, this is perfect now for Logan. We're right on the perfect time for that story. If we listen to sounds that are too loud, the cells will vibrate too much, and they can, oh goodness, they can be damaged. I'm going to put here, be damaged. Damaged. This will result in permanent, Logan, did you hear that? Permanent what? This will result in permanent, yeah, see, that was good. What? Huh? Permanent hearing loss. Hearing loss. And you can see there, I say, turn down the music. Now, I'm going to stop the video here for a moment, but I am going to show you one more thing, and that should bring us to the end. Look, here's some damaged hairs. This is what the hairs look like in Logan's ear right now. See that right there? Same with up here. So here, you can see he's in trouble. He's got lots of hearing loss coming. Let me just stop the video for a moment, and then I will entertain the questions, okay? Let me just get to here.